Hi, everyone. My name is Cathy Xu, she, her, hers, and I am a senior at Davidson. I am a CIS major in transnational literature, and today I will be presenting on my thesis, Revenge of the Mooncake Vixen, Asian American Female Shapeshifting and World Building. So to start off with a little bit of a literature review, my primary text I used was Revenge of the Mooncake Vixen by Marilyn Chin. It's a novel subtitled A Manifesto in 41 Tales that's also a collection of short stories centering a Chinese American female twins and their guardian grandmother. And so this novel was super important to me. When I first read it, I told my advisor that I felt seen for the first time. And it was distinctly Chinese American. And so I also argue through using this novel, I argue that fantasy, when and imagination, when it's not as whitewashed, when it's Asian American fantasy, it's not just about escapism or aesthetics, but also talking about Asian American fantasy as a site for social cultural critique and imagining alternatives. And then I also, for one of my theoretical texts, I use Imagine Otherwise on Asian Americanist Critique by Candace Cha, and it challenges this collective homogenous Asian American identity and problematizes this collective Asian identity that's usually and has traditionally been cis het male and East Asian, and it erased the complexities of Asian American identity, as well as making the mainstream politics of Asian Americans representation and legal citizenship. So instead, she proposes this kind of she deconstructs the Asian American identity and proposes idea of subjectlessness as a way of resisting definition and essentialism. And then I also draw from Gloria Anzaldua's idea of a La Neguala, and it's her version of a shapeshifter borrowed from indigenous thought and Nahuatl language. And so for her, it's a transition between the mestiza, which is characterized by hybridity, and Nempatlera, which is characterized by this, she calls connectionist view, in which the ego is dissolved. And so you're more so practicing empathy and connecting with others. And so for her, shapeshifting is a connection between consciousness and corporeality, which then transforms the material through spiritual imagination. So my main arguments for my thesis were, I mainly looked at shape-shifting in the novel in terms of the two twins, which was mainly centered on gender and sexuality, and then the Grandma Wong, which was a lot more about creating this, as I said, connectionist view, imagining the other, and this empathetic kind of solidarity building and radical love. And so my main arguments through analyzing these characters and the ways in which they shapeshifted was that, one, hybridity produces liminal spaces that, instead of being viewed as excluded from the nation state, are in excess of the state and the in-betweens from which counter-hegemony can be produced. And so instead of thinking of liminality, thinking of people with liminal identities and hybrid identities as being excluded, I propose that we think of it as an empowering thing to be able to be of a hybrid identity, that we are the overflow of the state, that the state and its categories cannot contain us. And so we produce spaces and excess that in return are sources of resistance, capable of creating this counter hegemony. And then my second argument is shapeshifting is the fluid movement between identities and within these liminal spaces, a form of corporal code switching. The shapeshifter challenges and disidentifies from rigid social categorizations and definitions like gender and sexuality. She is unknowable. And so we talk about code switching as a form of, as a way of survival in which you adapt your language and your behavior to different situations. So I propose that that the body is also a site for codes, that social codes or norms are read onto the body. So shape-shifting is a survival method in which you literally shift your body, and and code switch in order to survive and also detest these rigid categorizations. And beyond the individual, we must imagine otherwise. Imagine others not in otherness, but in differences. We must come together while recognizing difference and agency amongst us and resist state apparatuses through subjectlessness and radical love. And that's drawing from Candace Cheh's idea to imagine otherwise is not about imagining as the other, but rather is about imagining the other differently, to recognize agency in others, not simply to comprehend otherness. So not viewing the other as a us versus them, me versus them difference, but instead recognizing that we all have complex differences and that we are able to still come together despite those differences and because of those differences in order to create solidarity and create relationships based on radical love. Thank you.